Thank you for your practice, your presence, and welcome to Insight Community of the Desert. Again, folks online and folks here in the room at Mizell, thank you so much for showing up and being part of our community today. And just noticing, here we are. We made a choice to be here, and like I said, we showed up, and that's big. It's the foundational practice. If you don't show up, how are you going to practice? And if we don't show up for our life, how are we going to understand the life that we're living? And we can show up for a lot of different reasons. We can show up for friendship, for maybe a moment or two of stillness, maybe for peace, for wisdom, and perhaps ultimately, we have a goal toward awakening, or maybe just to cope a little better with the world around us, to cope with our experience of the world, the pain that we feel, the pain that others feel, and the uncertainty of living a human life. So Jack Kornfield speaks about the practice of stopping the war. And he wrote, "Our first task is to make our own heart a zone of peace. Instead of becoming entangled in an embattled bitterness or cynicism that exists externally, we need to begin to heal those qualities within ourselves. We have to face our own suffering, our own fear, and transform them into compassion." So this is the path that we're on. And I didn't say before, but the teachings and talks that we offer here are framed in Buddhist Dharma or Buddhist teachings, but you don't have to call yourself a Buddhist to be here by any means. The Buddha taught a way of looking at the world that leads to greater freedom and ease. And so we're interested in this path of wisdom and compassion, the two wings of the bird of awakening. How is it that we transform the heart? How do we meet each moment fully with as much harmlessness, as much compassion, as much wisdom as we possibly can? So this isn't easy work that we engage in. No one is immune from what the Buddha called the first noble truth, that being alive in a human form brings with it a certain amount of what he called dukkha, existential pain, difficulty, what Shakespeare called the rub. It often gets translated as suffering, but it's all the different forms of suffering, from deep pain all the way to just like, I don't like this. And as we progress along the Buddhist path, we actually may become more aware of suffering as we consciously sensitize our hearts. And also, we may be able to hold that suffering, that pain, with greater compassion because of that same practice. And in our world right now, most of us are likely feeling a lot of uncertainty, anxiety, fear, and certainly a lot of dukkha. The kind of mental and spiritual conditioning that leads to harm and injustice in the world is running rampant, becoming clearer, and at the same time, more impactful than ever, not just in this country, but the world is being threatened with greater and greater chaos because of delusion, aversion, and greed, which the Buddha termed the three poisons, the root of all of our suffering. And greed, aversion, and delusion gets expressed in theft and control and war and terrorism and genocide and climate destruction and inequity and unfairness of every kind. This is a really challenging time to be in this process of waking up. And there's a lot of dominant culture messaging that invites us to distract, to repress, to ignore, or just throw up our hands and check out, to numb ourselves. And we have a million ways available to us. I could say that it's brave to face what's here, but we actually don't have much of a choice, especially when our hearts are opening. So how can we support ourselves along the path, this path that's at times joyful and at times painful? How can we be kind to ourselves in the process, not as something that comes later as a result, but right now along the path? How do we challenge ourselves, find our edge of growth while holding our experience with compassion? So the best teachers I've had in my life did three things. They believed in me, and they believed in my capacity for growth, and they encouraged that growth through appropriate challenges. And they sort of seemed to intuit or just know, where my capacity was, and and back off when that was necessary, and push a little when that was necessary. Have you ever experienced that kind of teacher? Like someone like a school teacher or a coach or a music teacher or a parent or a spiritual guide, someone who could see your capacities, who saw you and encouraged you to express your beautiful qualities in the world. And maybe you have a relationship like that right now. I hope so. And we are also always our own teachers. And one of the things that I appreciate so much about the Buddhist path is that we're not asked to place unquestioning faith in a teacher, in another human being, but rather in our own inherent capacity for awakening. And so then when you experience yourself as a teacher, do you experience that confidence in your capacity and your innate goodness? Are you able to set appropriate challenges? Are you able to be kind and patient in the face of difficulty or failure, and joyful in the presence of growth? This kind of support is so important, and yet we may have only felt it a few times in our life. And I think that once we've felt that kind of support, it lives inside of us. And so we can remember to call upon it, and we can also remember to nourish it. So last week, I started teaching the 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction course here at Mizell. And it's the first time that I've actually taught this curriculum since right before COVID hit. And it's actually the first time that I've taught the course solo. In the past, I always taught it as a team with my mentor, Beth Mulligan, who some of you know. And so as I prepare for the classes, I review and I remember those classes that we taught together. And I look at my notes and I look at her feedback and her encouragement. And I feel that really supportive mentoring that I received from her. And she saw something in me that I didn't see. And she encouraged that and encouraged me to stretch, to get up in front of people, despite my fears and self-judgment, and to share what I could from the heart. And the good news is that we can learn to bring this support to our own practice, our own progress along the path and in life. And we can manifest the 4 qualities of heart, known as the Brahma Viharas in Buddhism, the divine abodes, the 4 divine abidings. And they're metta, loving friendliness. So teaching and supporting ourselves or others with a benevolent spirit, with a loving spirit. Karuna, compassion and care. Meeting ourselves and others right where we are, seeing clearly where we are and how we're coping. And mudita, appreciative joy, that pure feeling of good for you, given spontaneously. The teacher, internal or external, celebrating growth and progress. And then upekkha, equanimity, balance, This is the patience to be with things just as they are, and knowing when to encourage ourselves to stretch, when to encourage ourselves to take the rest that we might need. So I've had a number of conversations lately about the practice and Dharma, and how once you're on the path, once you're on the Dharma path, you're on the path. So we can make progress slowly or quickly, but we are changed through our practice. It is transforming. We can't forget what we have seen and experienced in our meditation and our contemplations. We can't unknow what we know. In the Buddhist teachings, this path is sometimes called this one going way, like a one-way street. And that's a challenge, that's an edge, leaving behind the familiarity of old ways and views and the limitations and the separations, and proceeding towards something that we may only be glimpsing through the fog up ahead. And as we pay attention, as we move down this path or up this path, we'll likely become more sensitive to injustice, to pain. We'll likely become more sensitive to our own pain and the pain of others. And that's an essential part of the process of awakening, of becoming more and more alive and awake to life. The process of waking up isn't a process of numbing. It's a process of feeling more deeply. Simply put, we become more intimately acquainted with that first noble truth. We understand suffering in a new way, and we just become more aware of it, not only in our lives, but in the systems around us and the communities around us and in ourselves. And so this process, this challenge to widen our capacity requires those qualities of the good internal teacher: confidence, compassion, joy, encouragement, wholesome challenge. And it requires what George Yancey, an Emory University professor, called the urgency of love. And he wrote, "We don't talk much about the urgency of love these days, especially within the public sphere. Much of our discourse is about revenge, name-calling, hate, and divisiveness. I have yet to hear it from our presidential hopefuls or our political pundits. I don't mean the Hollywood type of love, but the scary kind, the kind that risks not being reciprocated, the kind that refuses to flee in the face of danger. And the kind of love that refuses to flee in the face of danger is the energy of the Brahma Viharas, those divine abodes. So it's essential to remember and encourage these qualities, particularly in relationship to ourselves as we practice. And I'm talking about this today because this is what I feel I need right now. And I think what we need as people living in this culture and this time and this place in history, if you're paying attention, your heart is likely very, very tender. We're being challenged to stay awake, sensitive, and resilient and not go to sleep. And so being able to meet that challenge rests on a foundation of care for ourselves. How do I give myself the compassion that I need to be in this world? Am I encouraging and inviting and gently challenging my capacities like the good teacher? Or am I chiding, grinding myself down and feeling that I'm not doing enough or that I'm just not enough? So I often offer myself a form of metta practice where, rather than wishing for happiness or ease or well-being, I offer myself the wish for the absence of certain energies. May I be free from self-judgment. May I be free from self-criticism. May I be free from self-doubt. May I be free from self-judgment. May I be free from self-criticism. May I be free from self-doubt. We don't have to do anything to be worthy of these wishes. Just the fact that we are alive and having a human experience is enough. And I'm also noticing with all the expressions of hatred and violence and separation in the world, that not feeling isn't strong. And to be strong enough to feel, I need support. And so the conscious practice of metta and self-compassion isn't optional for me. And it's not selfish. The more we take care of ourselves, like I said, as we moved into the meditation, the more we create a field of care and support that benefits all beings. Our personal practice and our community practice affects the world. So Larry Yang, who some of you might know, who founded this community about 12 years ago, wrote in his book, Awakening Together, transforming society starts with transforming our own minds and hearts. The more we understand our suffering, the more we can understand the suffering of others. The more we cultivate our own freedom, the more we can help others to be free. When we practice self-care and kindness toward ourselves, we are really doing it for all beings. We're not separate. In the Buddhist teachings, there's something called the two benefits, and they refer to benefit for oneself, developing wisdom, virtue, and freedom for your own growth and well-being. And then benefit for others, using your wisdom and virtue to help and benefit others. So what is truly good for me is also good for you, and vice versa. I grew up with the saying, what blesses one blesses all, and I didn't really understand it. I thought it was just a way of sort of justifying getting what you wanted. But when I see it this way, you know, what is truly, truly good for me is truly good for you. And what is truly good for you is also good for me. It's a different window on it. So behind us, we have the Buddha and we have Kuan Yin. And one of the names for Kuan Yin, who is in this pose of being ready to help, is she who hears the cries of the world. And this sense of deep, deep listening speaks to the mindful heart of compassion. Can we listen to the cries of the world? Kuan Yin is the bodhisattva of compassion, and her primary way of experiencing the suffering in the world is through listening. She who hears the cries of the world. Can we listen deeply? Can we hear the cries of the world, and can we hear our own? And how do I respond when I hear my own cries? With blame and shame and judgment? Perhaps, you know, that's the way our cries were heard in the past by caregivers who weren't able to hold their own pain, their own broken places, and so couldn't hold ours. Or can I respond with the kindness and patience of the heart of this infinite mother energy, this Kuan Yin energy? Compassion has the element of patience in it. The words patience and compassion are related. The root word has a sense of bearing and enduring with, being with. enduring with being with the suffering of individuals and the world, and also our own pain? Can we have compassion for this one sitting right here? Why do we draw a distinction in these kind of talks? Compassion and self-compassion. Because we need to. We need to remember or relearn to be with our suffering in a kind and loving way. So Jack Kornfield, again, who I quoted the beginning of the talk, said, if your compassion doesn't include yourself, it isn't complete. He's drawing our attention to something very important, something in the culture that doesn't really support self-compassion, that doesn't encourage self-support. Not feeling is not strong. It takes patience and reserves of strength and support to feel deeply. It takes the understanding that this one going way is sometimes bumpy, sometimes not easy, and that it isn't like we get on the path and all the dukkha flies away, or we fly away from all the dukkha. And so this explicit teaching that we need to bring compassion to ourselves, that we're worthy of compassion, seems to not be something that had to be said explicitly in the Buddhist time. We don't find actually a lot of references to self-compassion in the Buddhist teachings. Instead, we find searching all directions with your awareness, you find no one dearer than yourself. In the same way, others are thickly dear to themselves, so you shouldn't hurt others if you love yourself. So that often gets restated the way Jack Kornfield restated it. There's no one in the world more deserving of your compassion than you. And I think that the Buddha would have agreed with that. It's not exactly what he said. Instead, like the assumption of his time and culture seems to be that people love themselves. Obviously, we have self-love, self-compassion, and therefore we can use that as a model of how to treat others. Our culture encourages being self-interested, but it doesn't encourage self-love or self-compassion. These are energies that we actually need to develop, to learn about, to contemplate, to feel into for ourselves and for others. And the qualities of the inner teacher or guide delighting in our success, patient and compassionate in our sorrows, and holding this deep sense of rightness, of okayness, of enoughness, just as we are, just where we are, right here, right now. And so, like all the practices, this isn't like flipping a switch. Okay, now I'm going to offer myself compassion. It's a gradual practice, a gradual intentional offering of what we need in this moment. So we all have beautiful intentions towards spiritual growth, or we wouldn't be here today, towards supporting the beautiful qualities of heart and mind. But how do we support ourselves when it isn't seeming to go the way we want it to, or when we just don't feel like sitting or practicing, or when we feel really distracted by something else? Sometimes we have a lot of energy and capacity to practice, and at other times we don't. Even after many years of meditating, I still encounter that. I thought, that would resolve and I would just be this meditator who sits down for 45 minutes in the morning and, totally has it and follows the breath and goes to great stillness and then relates to the world from that place of stillness. And sometimes that happens a little bit, but but I'm needing that patience there and holding that and holding myself with compassion. So as I reach out and, stretch my capacity, can I also keep a hand on the heart? Can I be compassionate toward myself? Can I hear that wise internal, perceptive, caring, challenging, encouraging teacher within me. Our ability to reach out is related to our ability to reach inward. So this is really important, creating a refuge for our tender heart, a wellspring of strength that we can draw on so that we can take a stand. There's the refuge of the Buddha, the Dharma, the sangha, our capacity to awaken the wisdom of the teachings and communities of like-minded travelers or fellow travelers. And there are the refuges of our own practice, our meditation practice, looking deeply with kindness and equanimity. The refuge of loving kindness practice, allowing and encouraging our hearts to open. And the refuge of compassion practice, enlarging that capacity to care for the suffering of ourselves and others. But when I find it hard to practice, it's often likely that I'm trying too hard, that I'm trying to get somewhere else rather than being with and knowing what is here, acknowledging and being with what is actually here. Or maybe my reserves are depleted and I'm no longer giving from my overflow and the bucket is sort of rattling down the well. And then this is where I can lean back on the formal self-compassion practices. So I know some people in the room are familiar with the mindful self-compassion practices that come from the Buddhist teachings. And there's a beautiful practice that I actually use a lot, and it's sort of a way of taking care of yourself in the moment. And there are 4 steps to it. And the first is mindfulness or awareness that there is suffering or pain in this moment. Acknowledging to myself, waking up to what's happening enough to be able to say, oh, this is a moment of suffering. This is a moment of pain that I'm experiencing right now. So taking that pause is the most important first step. It's like, can I actually see, oh, this is really hard? And can I accept that for myself? Like, yeah, this is hard. I'm having a hard time right now. I don't want to be with this, and here it is. And the second step is accepting or acknowledging that I'm not alone in that experience. So suffering is a part of life. Dukkha is a part of life. All human beings experience this. So this is a moment of suffering. Suffering is a part of life. And the third step is bringing a sense of care and concern to that experience. May I be kind to myself in this moment. So, yeah, may I be free from self-judgment. May I be free from self-criticism. May I be free from self-doubt in this moment. This is a moment of suffering. Suffering is a part of life. May I be kind to myself in this moment. And may I give myself the compassion that I need. May I give myself the compassion that I need. What is it that I need in this moment to care for myself? And there's a great refuge in that practice. I've remembered that many times over the last year when I feel fragmented by life or work or responsibilities or despair for the world around me. Of course, I'm in need of compassion. Of course we all are. And this is absolutely in line with the Buddha's Dharma, seeing what's here and caring for it and caring for myself. So just to close, I wanted to bring in something from Ayakema, another way of practicing. Ayakema was a Buddhist nun and teacher of the last century. And she invites us to become aware of the image of the Buddha, or maybe Kuan Yin, or Green Tara, or whatever divine being we know of that is alive to us, and become aware of them in our hearts. However, we visualize unconditional love and beauty, allowing it to shine from within our core, emanating golden rays of peace and light. And so she says, this will develop love for ourselves and also help us to love others, since we see that they might be carrying the same beautiful image in their hearts. Even if we are very different, even if we are opposed, they still carry the same beauty in their hearts. So is it safe now? It doesn't feel very safe in this world right now. But this is where practicing with others and remembering our capacity for self-compassion and holding what's difficult can give us the strength to grow, can give our heart enough space, enough foundation to stay open and sensitive. Can I give myself the compassion and safety that I need? Can I seek out communities and refuges that support that opening? It's an interesting question. Is it safe enough? And what happens? What happens if I give myself the compassion that I need in this moment? If I am awake to what I need and I give myself that, acknowledging my pain, seeing the universality of it, acting on that intention of kindness. So let's stop there and just take a couple of minutes to let the words settle and perhaps noticing the presence of self-compassion in your life. Is it a quality that you would like to develop? Or is it perhaps already very strong? And perhaps bringing to mind a difficult moment in the last week. Doesn't have to be something major, but just a moment where yeah, you were experiencing some difficulty, some pain, some anxiety. Noticing what it's like to bring that acknowledgement to the memory of that moment. Oh, this is a moment of suffering. Knowing suffering is a part of life. This is part of the human experience, something that I have in common with all other human beings. May I be kind to myself. Maybe I was able to, and maybe I wasn't in that moment, but in the future, may I be kind to myself when I notice my own pain. May I give myself the compassion that I need. What might that have looked like in that moment? How might I have held myself with compassion? Thank you for your kind attention. And I would like to spend a few minutes opening the floor to any comments or observations or questions or anything that you might like to share. And that goes for folks on Zoom as well. So if you'd like to speak from the Zoom world, please raise your hand. So I'm going to share the screen. Thank you, Randalee. I'm going to share the screen with the folks online so they can also offer this together. And we can just start with the first line. Going forth into this world, so in need of light, may I bring all the kindness and wisdom I embody to each being and each situation that I meet. May the power of my practice today strengthen my resolve to be an agent of peace and justice in this world. Going forth together into this world so in need of light, may we together bring all the kindness and wisdom we embody to each being and each situation that we meet. May the power of our practice today strengthen our resolve to be agents of peace and justice in this world. We dedicate our practice for the liberation of all beings, the great, the small, the wise, the ignorant, the powerful, and the powerless. May all beings be liberated from sorrow and loss, hatred and injustice, scarcity and want, and every form of suffering. May our practice today be a prayer for peace, and may it benefit all beings without exception. Thanks, everyone, and hope to practice with you again soon. And may we keep our practice alive through the week. Nice. Thanks, online folks. Really good to see you.